We live in a world that teaches us to fear emotional pain, to view it as an enemy to be vanquished, a burden to be numbed, or a shadow to be outrun. Yet, in our frantic efforts to escape its grasp, we sever ourselves from one of the most profound sources of wisdom available to us. Emotional pain is not a random affliction, nor is it a cruel jest played by an indifferent universe. It is a sacred messenger, a voice rising from the depths of the unconscious, calling us to awaken to truths we have long ignored, suppressed, or betrayed. When sorrow pierces the heart, when anxiety coils tightly, when despair threatens to suffocate, we are not merely suffering, we are being summoned. The psyche is sounding an alarm, urging us to turn inward, to listen, to reclaim the fragmented parts of our soul that have been exiled in our pursuit of comfort, approval, or survival. Pain is never without purpose. It is not a meaningless torment but a deliberate signal, a cry from the soul when we have strayed too far from our authentic nature. The deeper the pain, the more profound the betrayal of our true self. We often mistake pain as a reaction to external events, the sting of betrayal, the weight of loss, the shame of failure. Yet, if we summon the courage to look beyond the surface, we discover that pain is not merely about these outer circumstances. It speaks of inner structures that have grown too rigid, too small to contain the expansive truth of our being. The roles we've clung to, the beliefs we've inherited, the personas we've crafted to navigate the world, these constructs, once our shields, become our shackles. They suffocate the soul, and pain arrives as the great disruptor, its raw intensity shattering the illusions we've built to protect ourselves. This pain is not a wound to be feared but a sacred opening, a portal through which the unconscious speaks. Unlike the conscious mind, which communicates in logic and words, the unconscious speaks in the language of symbols, images, sensations, and, most urgently, emotions. Pain is the most insistent of these, demanding that we stop, that we feel, that we confront what we have long avoided. It brings forth hidden fears, unresolved grief, repressed anger, and forgotten longings, not to destroy us, but to liberate us from the prison of self-deception. To resist this call is to court a dangerous illusion. Many seek escape through distractions, addictions or external fixes, believing that a new job, a new relationship, or a change in circumstances will silence the pain. But pain does not originate outside us, it wells up from within, and until we meet it with courage, it will persist, cloaked in new forms, haunting us until we listen. When we surrender to this inner summons, when we lean into the discomfort rather than flee, a profound transformation begins. We start to hear the message beneath the suffering, a whisper guiding us toward aspects of ourselves we've abandoned. Perhaps it is the authentic voice, silenced by years of conformity, the creativity dismissed as impractical, or the inner child crying for the love and acceptance never received. Pain points us toward these exiled fragments, demanding we reclaim and honor them. When embraced consciously, pain becomes the catalyst for awakening, unlocking the doors to the unconscious and creating space for a deeper, truer self to emerge. It is not about eradicating pain but about allowing it to teach us, to heal us, to guide us back to wholeness. As we sit with this pain, allowing its intensity to wash over us, something even more unsettling begins to unfold. The carefully constructed persona, the mask we've worn to meet the expectations of society, family, and culture, begins to fracture. This persona, so meticulously crafted, has served as a shield, protecting us from rejection, shame, or the terror of being seen as vulnerable, flawed, or different. Over time, it became so familiar that we mistook it for our true self, forgetting it was merely a role, a defense mechanism designed to ensure our survival in a world that demands conformity. But emotional pain has a ruthless way of rendering this role unbearable. The titles we've amassed, the achievements we've chased, the validation we've sought from others, these once gave us a false sense of safety, but now they feel empty, brittle, hollow. This disillusionment is both terrifying and sacred. The applause of others no longer fills the void within, the approval we once craved becomes a chain binding us to a life that no longer resonates. We find ourselves standing at the edge of an existential precipice, confronted by a question that shakes the foundations of our identity: if I am not this persona, who am I? What remains when the mask begins to crumble? This is not a moment of failure but an initiation, a sacred unraveling of the false self that makes way for the authentic. The ego, desperate to maintain control, clings to old patterns, even those that cause suffering, for it fears the unknown more than the familiar pain. This stage may manifest as a dark night of the soul, where meaning dissolves, relationships shift, and isolation looms. The world we once knew, its rituals, its demands, its comforts, no longer makes sense, and we feel adrift, alienated from the roles we've played and the people who once defined us. Yet, it is precisely in this disintegration that the seeds of our true self begin to take root. In the fertile darkness of this crisis, the soul whispers its forgotten truths. We start to remember the parts of ourselves we abandoned to be accepted, the passions we buried, the desires we suppressed, the dreams we dismissed as childish or impractical. These are not new discoveries but homecomings, reunions with aspects of our being that have waited patiently beneath the mask. This is the death of the conditioned identity, a symbolic shedding of the stories we've told ourselves about who we must be to be loved, to be safe, to be enough. It is a psychological rebirth, raw and chaotic, yet deeply sacred, for it is the necessary step toward becoming whole. This shedding is not an act of rebellion or selfishness but an act of profound self-love. The world may resist, urging us to don the mask again, to play the familiar role, to return to the comfort of the known. Friends and family may accuse us of changing, of withdrawing, of no longer fitting into the spaces we once occupied. But we must resist the temptation to betray ourselves again. The path of authenticity is often lonely, for it requires us to walk away from the external validations that once defined us. Yet, it is on this path that we meet our true self, not the one crafted by others, but the one that has always existed beneath the layers of conditioning. In this meeting, we find a peace that no title, no achievement, no amount of applause can ever provide. As the persona crumbles, a new challenge emerges, the encounter with the shadow. This is the part of the journey many avoid, for it demands we face not only the aspects of ourselves we've denied but also the qualities we despise, fear, or judge in others. The shadow is not evil, it is simply everything we've pushed into the darkness because we believed it was unacceptable, unlovable, or dangerous. It holds our hidden anger, our envy, our insecurities, our need for control, our suppressed desires, and the primal fears we've locked away. Pain forces this confrontation, rendering our old strategies of avoidance, distractions, numbing, projection, ineffective. The shadow emerges not as a polite guest, but as a disruptive force, leaking into our thoughts, relationships and dreams, demanding to be seen. This descent into the underworld of the self is not a punishment but a sacred opportunity. The shadow is a teacher, containing the lost fragments of our wholeness. What we call ugly may be the seat of our creativity, what we reject as weakness may hold the tenderness our soul craves, what we label failure may carry the humility that deepens our humanity. To integrate the shadow is to sit with these parts without judgment, to understand them, to make peace with them. This is not a one-time event but a lifelong process, for as long as we live, there will be aspects of ourselves that need to be seen, accepted, and brought into the light. Each step in this work loosens the chains of conditioning, expands our consciousness, and brings us closer to wholeness. As we integrate the shadow, a natural withdrawal from the superficial begins. The noise of the world, shallow conversations, frantic pursuits, endless distractions, becomes intolerable. This is not isolation in a pathological sense, nor is it a retreat born of bitterness. It is a sacred pause, a craving for silence where the soul's subtle whispers can be heard. We may feel drawn to nature, to solitude, to practices that nourish the inner world rather than feed the ego's appetite for stimulation. Friends may misunderstand, accusing us of distance, but the soul requires no permission to return to itself. In this stillness, we see through the games of validation and fear that once defined us. We realize how much of our life was built on the need to be seen, to be approved, to be significant in the eyes of others. And in the quiet, we discover that true significance comes not from the crowd but from alignment with our own essence. This withdrawal is not an escape, but a return, a homecoming to the inner temple we abandoned in our search for love and approval outside ourselves. Here, we rediscover a self that needs no external validation to exist, a self that simply is. This stage may bring guilt or pressure to justify our need for space, but there is nothing to explain. The soul's journey is its own justification. This retreat is temporary, a gestation period where the psyche gathers strength, clarity, and vision. When we emerge, we do so not as the person we were but as a presence rooted in authenticity, no longer bound by the need to perform or conform. In this sacred emptiness, where old identities dissolve, we encounter a fertile void. The mind resists, craving new labels or distractions, for it fears the silence, the stillness, the unknown. Yet, the soul knows this pause is essential. Here, the heart grows quiet, and the authentic self begins to stir, not with grand visions but with subtle knowings, the warmth of sunlight on the skin, the rhythm of breath, the stillness of a forest. This emptiness teaches us that our worth is not tied to roles, achievements, or the approval of others but to our simple being. It reveals the radical truth that we are enough, not because of what we do but because of who we are. From this surrender, a new foundation forms, rooted not in fear or ambition but in presence, trust, and alignment with life's mystery. We no longer feel the need to control every outcome or force life to fit our expectations. Instead, we open to what wants to emerge through us, listening to the quiet impulses of the soul rather than the loud demands of the ego. This is the birth of a new relationship with life, one that values being over striving, trust over fear, allowing over grasping. We learn to move with the rhythms of the soul, trusting that what unfolds is part of our sacred path. As this alignment deepens, wisdom emerges, not from books or external teachings but from the crucible of our own experience. This wisdom is forged in the fires of our pain, in the stillness of our surrender, in the courage to face what we once feared. It is a quiet certainty, a knowing that lives in our bones, in our breath, in the way our heart leans toward truth. We no longer chase purpose as something external to be achieved, we realize that our very existence is purposeful, that our presence, our truth, is enough. From this space, we live in devotion to our authentic self, not as an act of rebellion but as an act of reverence for the unique life that moves through us. This alignment does not erase life's challenges or pain. Rather, it transforms how we meet them. We no longer fear pain as something to avoid but see it as a guide, a teacher pointing us deeper into our becoming. We no longer resist the unknown but embrace its mystery, trusting that it holds the next steps of our unfolding. In this space, we feel our connection to all of life, not as a concept but as a lived truth. We see ourselves in others, even those still lost in their pain or masks, and we offer compassion not from superiority but from the humble knowing that we, too, have walked through darkness. This is the silent gift of emotional pain, it strips away the false to reveal the soul's eternal truth. It is not a curse but an initiation, an invitation to descend into the depths of our being, where we discover that everything we sought outside ourselves, love, purpose, wholeness, has been waiting within all along. When we arrive at this place, when we taste this inner freedom, we understand that the journey was never about escaping pain but about allowing it to open the hidden doors that lead to the fullness of life. So, when pain comes knocking, do not turn it away. Open the door, invite it in, sit with it, and listen. Let it guide you to the parts of yourself you've forgotten, the truths you've buried, the wholeness you've always carried. The path to awakening begins in this courageous act of turning inward, of honoring the discomfort, of trusting the journey within. Your soul is waiting, and it speaks through the very pain you've been taught to fear. Embrace it, and let it lead you home.